Tyranitar Tube wasn't a lying, fake leak, clickbaiting scumbag. He was a prophet. And the people that bought the Alolan Arcanine plush, they weren't getting a bootleg. They were dealing with a merchant from the future. Because now we have Terastal Arcanine. Let's see the possibilities of a Water-type Arcanine and more in this video. If you enjoyed, don't forget to leave a like, share with your friends, comment your thoughts down below. Please comment your thoughts down below. I'm losing my mind with how difficult it is to figure out Terastalizing for all the new Pokemon or updating their movesets, and we still don't have all the full details, but I love it. I love the idea. I'm so excited for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. The open world, it's going to be the greatest game ever, and the competitive is going to just be absolute insanity. So I'm excited for this. I can't wait to see what you guys come up with, and I beg, I pray that we're going to have battle replays so we can live in the ultimate Pokemon metagame. So yeah, let's see what happens with a Water-type Arcanine. Unfortunately, Arcanine, kind of a tough Pokemon to use. We have offensive Arcanine, where flying actually ends up working out the best. More on that in a second. And then we have supportive Arcanine. Now, the interesting thing about supportive Arcanine is depending on what people are Terastalizing into, maybe that's what Arcanine can just sit on. You can have all the Pokemon on your team with a different Terastal type, or some with the same Terastal type, but you don't have to use it. But it could be that 1 in 100 chance that you go, wait a second, if I have the ground type Terastal Arcanine, it hard counters like 2 of the things in the meta, and it makes up for a lot of weaknesses in my team. You don't always pull it out, but maybe you do. Or maybe the water type Arcanine ends up being something meta. Either way, I feel that you want to bring in Pokemon that can at least halt momentum, and Intimidate is a good way of doing that, because if they have a physical Terastal Pokemon that's boosting, that's popping off, that's getting all kinds of crazy sweeping in, Intimidate is slowing down that Pokemon's power, Will-O-Wisp is removing it from the game, and Bulldoze is forcing a switch or just leaving it open for a KO. So as like an anti-physical Pokemon, Arcanine is a good idea. And that's where things get interesting, because you're coming in on the Intimidate, so you don't need that defensive investment, even though you primarily want to do this against physical attackers. But if you're going up against special attacker, you want to be able to survive against them. So that's why I'm going max hit points with that special defense investment on the special defense nature. And then this is a very specific speed. So at -1, 130 base speed Pokemon are slower than you. Adjust speed to whatever the common speed tier is, but this is kind of like a good place to start. So you just throw this Arcanine out there as like a revenge Pokemon on a special attacker, or maybe on like a really good switch, and then you have a lot of things in your kit. Maybe a Pokemon's popping off, has 1 health, did some kind of Focus Sash shenanigans on setup, and is now completely unstoppable, except Arcanine comes in, and then it can extreme speed and remove that Pokemon as a revenge. There's a couple things you can just hard switch into with the Intimidate, potentially, and then Morning Sun's going to heal you up, and again, like, you're just there to now remove and eliminate threats. As for Water-type Arcanine, maybe it does a thing, because the problem is, there's too many damn Pokemon. Even with the reduced dex, I can't think of everything. So, is there any existing Water-type Pokemon that can do the things Arcanine does? Probably just absolutely not. Like, what? Well, I mean, Scald, but that's not as reliable as the Will-O-Wisp and other, like, speed tech and sustain and this stat profile. So now you have to think about archetypes that are missing from specific Pokemon types that were never worth the thought experiment or theory craft because it was just a waste of time as an impossibility. But this Arcanine actually seems pretty good as just a well-rounded, supportive kind of Pokemon. Better type combinations, maybe. Like, water's weird because you don't resist earthquake, you don't resist rock, you do turn water into a resistance, but if you go grass, then you also get the resistance to ground, which could be pretty powerful, depending on what a lot of Terastal is going to be going into. Then you pick up a lot of weaknesses. Game is going to get weird, and that's also if you just don't have a better Terastal Pokemon, but having that extra little bit of tech. I think Arcanine can just be a really good kind of toolkit Pokemon to where, oh, I need a fire tank, but also a ground tank. that probably has horrible synergy with like the double water weakness, but maybe you're running a Toxapex or an Amoonguss or something, so maybe the double water weakness doesn't matter. Actually, you funnel multiple weaknesses into the same tank Pokemon because you still have a catch-all other tank on your team. Team building, oh god, there's just not enough IQ in the world for this. And then we have a more offensive Arcanine, but I feel like this could just be a liability. However, you have really good coverage. So that's where the funny thing about, okay, what kind of Arcanine do we get for typing comes into play, because Fighting Dark, that's just solid coverage. So we have good amount of normal effective and super effective hits. Problem is, there's just been so many types of Pokemon, you don't have as many good, like, just catch-all synergies immediately in the game anymore. But you add in the flying, this gives you some of the most super effective hits possible, and that's what Arcanine needs. You need to be hitting everything super effective, or else you're going to get set up again, so you're going to take too much damage, and you have like a lot of sweeping pressure that could get a little overwhelming. If we go into Ice, that's going to be the only thing, I think, that's more. But okay, let's bring out the Water Arcanine. Damn, that coverage is trash on the super effective hits. And Flying does have the benefit of making it to where Earthquake just becomes immune. So that could potentially be a free setup turn. Now, my initial read on Terastalizing is that using it for the cheeky hee I'm turning my weakness into immunity is not going to be a good strategy in general, because you only get one Terastal Pokemon. And if you use it like a Mega to where you whiff your Mega for 1 or 2 turns, then your opponent turns it into a 6-0 sweep on their Mega because they just have a better strategy around it, then you're going to lose a lot of games. So like, okay, cool, you get 1, maybe 2 cheeky turns out of that Terastal, but if your opponent has a more well-rounded strategy, then you're getting run over. But in Arcanine's case, and other very specific cases probably, this is where you actually find a lot of coverage, and there's a lot of just instant flying that's kind of lacking for good amounts of damage. Like, okay, you have Aerialate shenanigans, kinda, not really. So with this, like, actually going into flying could be pretty decent, especially with the rest of the coverage. Arcanine, its biggest problem is that if it wants to do serious damage, it's going to be taking a lot of damage on the recoil, because you have things like the Flare Blitz, you also have things like the Wild Charge. Weirdness is that Flare Blitz is going to do as much damage as a super effective Wild Charge. So there's really no reason to run the Wild Charge except for less recoil, but then that's coverage shenanigans. But again, really, this is just kind of like, you set up the agility, you're like a 3-hit KO Pokemon, especially with the Citrus Berry, and then you finish off something that was being problematic. Like, this is to slow down the opponent's physical sweeper that's way out of control. And that brings us to the EVs with agility. Also ignore the IV shenanigans, because I'm trying to represent Terastal on a platform that doesn't have it, so hidden power is kind of the best thing to use. Just kind of like, hey, this is an idea behind flying. Either way, it's specifically made for beneficial base 70 speed Pokemon with +2 speed. Now, while that sounds convoluted, it's actually on some pretty common Pokemon. Cloyster is going to be a monster, and yay, we get to talk about Cloyster in this video because it's in the next little batch of Pokemon we're going to be covering, so that's good. Yeah, this isn't an Arcanine only video, even though it's starting to feel that way. That's just the depth we're dealing with in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. It's beautiful, but my god, it's rough as well. So yeah, this could also be the result of some kind of crazy baton passing setup. That's gonna get wild, speed boosting, other forms of finding speed. So I think it's a pretty good place to put Arcanine while getting as much bulk as possible. But again, speed tiers will vary depending on like other things on the Pokemon going on. So that's gonna be something to keep an eye on. But this is just kind of like good to break down. And it also kind of shows why you want to run the close combat, because alright, Arcanine comes in, and then the game gets, like, super weirdly messy, because even at the -1 on Intimidate, the +1 that it's getting from the Shell Smash, Rock Blast, super effective hit is wrecking you, and even the Icicle Spear is wrecking you. Like, I'm looking at this, and I feel like I put something in wrong, but 90-80, and then not going full investment, you're just going to be slightly more bulky than a sweeper Pokemon that's generally pretty frail. So yeah, unless you lead Arcanine, things are going to get pretty ugly. So you go agility, they go Shell Smash, you're still faster. Boom, close combat, good chance to KO. Also, this should be to 52. So good chance to KO. Adamant nature, all that other stuff, and that kind of shows like, yeah, you live and die by the super effective hits. Terastal, yeah, you're still going to be eating the rock type move, so it's about that coverage kind of stuff. Citrus Berry doesn't keep you alive through all the hits, so that's not really going to change much of anything. And then Arcanine, again, every move it wants to use makes it weaker in some way. Wild Charge, Flare Blitz is costing health, Close Combat is costing defenses. This maybe turns you from a 3-hit KO into a 2-hit KO, even with the Citrus Berry. Crunch, you just want to outspeed like a Gengar or something and then hit it for as much damage as possible. But at least you can kind of sit in and have like good coverage, try to find those super effective hits, and at least be there to not let things run away with you. But I'm not saying like, oh man, this is going to be an A-tier Pokemon that you should pick up. It's like, it's an idea with the Terastal. But I think having type with whatever weirdness ends up coming out with like a really good idea behind a Tera type, and then just this like Disruptor Arcanine, I think that's going to be the play. And there's a good chance that Water Terastal Arcanine is going to be good, so there you go. There's your Alolan Arcanine. Let's skip ahead to Cloyster real quick, because this Pokemon is already disgusting, as we've shown from this damage calculation, where we're trying to run some kind of bulky Pokemon, and the resisted hit at +1 from the Intimidate. Like, even if this Pokemon gets intimidated, it is still wrecking house. And then we can also just kind of add in some damage. So I've been pressing, like, crit to show that this is going to be Tera, and yeah, you just go Ice. So that's the beauty of Terastalizing. Some Pokemon, they're just going to double down into their type and get the bonus damage. Others are going to flip a weakness into a resistance or an immunity. And other Pokemon are just going to go to a completely different typing to fill a niche. We can't even begin. I'm going to do all these videos. I'm going to do like 1 or 2 movesets and 5 to 10 minutes of strategy for each Pokemon. And we're not even going to have 1% before the game comes out. It's going to be wild. So yeah, we got that, and yeah, now we can just kind of show that this is going to obliterate every Pokemon out there. So yeah, you go Ice Terastalizing, and you just go for it. Really, the only vulnerability is going to be on the setup, that if you take damage while setting up, then you're going to have a limited lifespan with the Life Orb. But if this is a 3-hit, like a 3-for-1 Pokemon reliably, that's probably enough to make the Terastalizing matter. Thinking about some Pokemon that can come in and stop this. Full defensive Toxapex, full defensive Slowbro, but even then, like, they don't want to eat these hits. As we also saw, the Icicle Spear does a lot of damage on its own, so maybe you put in some kind of Terra Blast here. I don't know what gives you perfect coverage. That's why we have a type coverage checker. We also don't know all the Pokemon that are going to be in the game, so maybe some of these in the decks where it's like, actually, you find less normal effective or less not very effectives, and then the super effectives kind of remain the same, just kind of like off of dex RNG. But water, not really bringing too much to the table here. We can fish around for some stuff. Electric is looking pretty good. Who's expecting a physical electric hit from a water type Pokemon? That's pretty ferocious. Grass also finding a good amount, but then ground. Like, if Toxapex actually becomes a threat, I don't know what can handle this. So yeah, maybe instead of just like kind of going for the neutral one-shots and everything, because Icicle Spear with Life Orb especially still finds those, and if you get like some kind of setup turn, it gets really, really nasty. So we can change the Hidden Power / Terastal into ground, and yeah, now you have like Cloyster with Earthquake at +2 while setting up all of this stuff, and that's a stab Earthquake. Oh no, wait, never mind, that doesn't work though, because then you lose the stab on Icicle Spear. But if you're only using that for like super hits, and then nah, I don't know, maybe that goes away, or we have the technology, let's play around with this. All right, let's see what happens if we bring in a Chansey now, and then we drop it to level 50. So we don't one-shot. Also, Rock Blast effectively becomes the same thing as the Icicle Spear, just for coverage, because now they're both non-stab. And if we did have Icicle Spear doing stab damage. What does that bring us? Still not a one-hit KO, even at the +2. Now, let's say nothing wants to switch into this Cloyster, so you get your setup, you go and wreck a Pokemon, they bring in the Chansey response. Because of Life Orb Seismic Toss damage, you're effectively sacking off your Cloyster here, but Chansey is going to be taking not that 81%, unless you do go for the double ice, in which case now you're neutrally one-shotting everything. It's kind of rough. Wait a second, now let's go. Now we have like a lot of theorycraft going on here, and again, this is just for one Pokemon, and people are going to be, but I'm not running Cloyster, and they're going to get bored, but then that just means they're idiots that don't want to get any better Pokemon, because this is going to apply to pretty much everything across the board, or if you're going up against Cloyster, you want to know what's going to be going on. So now let's actually bring in that Toxapex kind of deal here. Now, Toxapex definitely doesn't want to get two-shot, and it makes things pretty difficult. But I think that Rock Blast range is like exactly stockpile range to where, alright, all of that lands, stockpile, then barely a chance to KO. Especially if you have like Black Sludge, then there's no chance to KO. And then it just gets the recover off, and now Toxapex is going to +3 and winning the game in the face of a Rock Blast. Icicle Spear, if we can find that, and then we do the double Terastal damage, actually becomes more. So we lose our like ground one-shot Terastal, but then we actually have like just two-shot Toxapex can't do anything except Scald and Pray. Like Icicle Spear hits, Toxapex scalds, 30% chance that Cloyster gets burned, Toxapex still forced to switch out, get some Regenerator back, and the game is messy. Also Haze, I guess, is a thing, but that would completely obliterate Cloyster's day, and I think Haze might actually just be as much of a thing as ever. I don't know the direction. The problem is, this is where like the hacking thing just gets even worse for Pokemon, where I have to make two Cloysters now if I want to try out something competitively, a ground Cloyster and an ice Cloyster, and maybe Cloyster doesn't make it to my final team, or I only use it a couple of times. But we can see the damage numbers are all over the place. However, anything that can over two-shot a Toxapex to where it can't even +1, probably fine. So going ice and then having the liquidation and other coverage outs, probably okay. Speaking of Toxapex, the next Pokemon we're talking about is Slowbro. So we have a Regenerator tank that effectively wants to do the same things as Toxapex, but minus the Toxic, because that got stripped away from every Pokemon. Alright, how does the tankiness look? So we just have like a random throw out here of like Life Orb, 95 attack, 120 base power, but it's mixed to kind of show the damage. So super effective, non-stab, Thunderbolt from a Life Orb attacker, going to be a two-shot on the Slowbro. Also just like the straight up solid neutral hit, going to be a three-shot on the Slowbro. And then Toxapex kind of looking the same. Now, this is like full defensive Toxapex. Also, let's go and plug in these EVs. And as we can see, Slowbro, as tanky as Toxapex defensively, is going to be taking more damage special, so that might be something to think about for the EVs. But since you have a Regenerator tank, how many Regenerator Pokemon do you put on team? Do you put a Slowbro and a Toxapex on your team? The reason being that you can just Terastalize one of them into whatever complementary type you want, and now you have double Regenerator synergy. One can be the special tank, one can be the physical tank. Maybe you back it up with a Blissey. 3 tanks makes it pretty heavy, but depending on what your opponent's doing, if they're not running Taunt, if they're not running Haze, they just lose the game. So this is going to get kind of ugly, and then at the same time, we've talked about like other Terastal Pokemon that just want to run you over through brute force. We are now dealing with a more hyper version of rock, paper, scissors than ever before in Pokemon, and I can't imagine any of how it's going to play out, but we do have some fun stuff. So, Terastal Fighting type is something I've been waiting to talk about because of Body Press. You can turn a tank fighting, make its weaknesses not as crazy, and then potentially like get some kind of offset going on. So Slowbro goes from 5 weaknesses down to 3. And they're not going to be throwing a Psychic on you initially, so the change into Fighting is going to be pretty nice. Also for like Dark type, super effective hits. Kind of has that synergy there, and then it's mostly about, now you have Body Press. And is it all the weaknesses holding Slowbro back compared to Toxapex? Also, now you always have a Fighting Pokemon. Fighting Tank, not really something you think about on like a hard switch-in. This does get immune by Ghost-type Pokemon, and I try to stay away from that in general when it comes to like your mono Giga Tank setup. It would be really a shame if you go +6/+6, 6 turns dedicated to it, Body Press, and they have a Ghost type. So that is where maybe you need to consider like some heavy, dark, sweeping presence. Just remove any Ghost type Pokemon. They don't have like a secret Ghost Terastal. I see this just kind of obliterating everything. You either have leftovers, slack off, but if you get status, that can be annoying, which brings us to good old Chesto Resto, while also freeing up the leftover slot. That's a benefit of Toxapex because it has Black Sludge over leftovers. The game is weird, and if we reduce Slowbro's weaknesses down, especially from like common stuff, Rotom comes in, Slowbro doesn't want to deal with that. Hydreigon comes in, Slowbro doesn't want to deal with that. Actually, what does Hydreigon do to fighting Slowbro? Eat a Body Press and die. Is Slowbro the better Toxapex now? It still does like go down to poison shenanigans because Toxic can't poison Toxic, and Toxapex does get the Toxic, but Body Press is just one-shotting everything, and then you're setting up faster. That's why I'm like proposing, is this better than Toxapex? Because you're just getting +2. You're making it to where you can tank into anything, get that Amnesia, get that Iron Defense, and then just survive, and you're winning. Maybe good amount of special defense, maybe you need that natural defense in there for like overwhelming physical pressure, to where it does come to that point where you bring it in, eat 60%, 70%, Iron Defense, rest, Chesto Berry pops, Iron Defense, rest, wake up, Body Press. Now you just one-shot the entire Pokemon enemy's team. Like, if they don't have Ghost, GG. Does that mean you actually need the Ghost Arcanine? Would be absolutely hilarious. So it's going to be a pretty interesting angle on how you balance your tanks into Terastalizing, how many setup tanks, how many just natural beefy tank Pokemon. Haven't even talked about Clefable because we've skipped over that part of the dex. It's not a confirmed official Pokemon though. However, if Wigglytuff, Jigglypuff's in the game, you gotta have the Moonstone Bros, right? So why even run Slowbro if you go steal Clefable and then you win every single game forever? I don't know. Or maybe you just have other natural tanks to back it up. Like, Slowbro has Regenerator. Is it a risk to have setup Regenerator where the Pokemon could just be, like, naturally fat? Or do you have other Pokemon that complement it, Skarmbliss kind of things? Do you use your Terastalization to create a Skarmbliss combo of anything else? Therefore, fighting Slowbro is actually weak and unnecessary. Like, this is just for silliness, memes. Do get some type advantage out of it, but does Body Press need any more damage at +6? I say no, probably. So is there a better type here to use as like your one potential catch-all? It's gonna be crazy, but just throwing out some ideas. And I haven't even made a team. Like, for all we know, when you actually make the team, that's when you worry about Tera typing. Maybe for sweepers, you want to dedicate to like a set Tera type for the most part. When you're looking at all 6 of the Pokemon that are then going to be on your team, maybe that's when you go, I need a Ghost Pokemon. I need a random Grass Pop-Off. And then you created some kind of weird abomination to where the Grass type Slowbro removes all counterplay from your team. Don't ask me why. Next up, we have Magneton, which also means Magnezone, so a little bit of skipping ahead in the dex and using a better Pokemon, but maybe we can salvage something out of the Magneton because Eviolite Pokemon are good, and we always have gimmicks. You know, we got Endure Salac Berry or like Endure Boost Berry combos. We have Rest Sleep Talk. We got Chesto Resto. Can slap that onto a lot of different Pokemon. Is Magneton viable if it's a monotype? Is the question. This stat package with an Eviolite, can it just work when it doesn't have to worry about a 4-time super effective hit from a ground type move when Earthquake's everywhere? Does it want to become Mono Steel and then just have like boosted Flash Cannon damage, which is still threatening from a 120 uninvested tank? Like, that's gonna hurt. And then like you have Thunder Wave, so you Thunder Wave, you rest Sleep Talk, depending on like where you're like you don't even need to immediately rest. You go Thunder Wave, Flash Cannon, then rest. Hope the Sleep Talk goes for another Flash Cannon. They get paralyzed once or twice. I don't know too many Pokemon that are gonna be outsped after the nerf to paralysis being 50% instead of 75% slow. But maybe there's like some kind of like little shenanigans here where you get that extra little bit. Also, you might want to knock it off the hit points because Eviolite giving you bonus stats. I don't know. So depending on speed tiers, then you tech in a little bit of speed, you outspeed everything, then Flash Cannon, and then you rest Sleep Talk, and maybe you find the right Tera type. I just threw out the Steel because huge Flash Cannon damage. But now you can put this. You can put an Eviolite into any type you want that can bring Thunder Wave support and then whatever damage you want. Now, Flash Cannon does hit everything, so it doesn't have immunities, which means you're not falling into any kind of trappiness. But maybe there's just like a better type. Steel has the resistances, but carries a lot of weaknesses. Electric just has the one weakness, and it's going to be the same as Steel. So do you do this? Unfortunately, you are immune by ground, so you might have to find another move. Or do you just go for some kind of safer Tera type? Is this your Ghost? Do you just make Dusclops? Do you make Dusclops as Thunder Wave and damage? Also, it has Magnet Pull, so if other Pokemon are going Steel Tera type, actually something to consider depending on like the Pokemon you're Tera typing. If you have the Steel on a tank so you don't get poisoned, and then you get trapped in by Magnet Pull, game could get really ugly real quick. Maybe, like, what if this is just stalled Magneton? I hate timer stalling. I'm completely against it. But if you've got no other way to win and you have Pokemon advantage to where it's like, okay, they turn their Toxapex into a Steel-type Pokemon, and it's going to completely run me over. But they only have 2 Pokemon. I have 3. I bring in this Magneton, and now it's actually impossible for either of us to die. Because Toxapex has like the infinite sustain, especially with the, like stockpile and recover and stuff. You hit it with the Thunder Wave, and then eventually you run out of Terra Blast. But you eventually just kind of win the stalemate off the Magnet Pool, or you burn through enough of Toxapex's like heals and utility. Maybe because of the Thunder Wave, you fish for the Paralysis turn to find the switch in, to then counterplay it in some kind of way. Maybe you don't have to Terastalize Magneton, you just save that for another Pokemon, but this could actually just be like some kind of weird thing, or maybe you just kind of lean into it. You go for the Steel type, you go for the Terra Blast Steel, maybe the Flash Cannon because of that chance to lower special defense. Also might come down to PP. If Terra Blast only has 8 because it's a gimmicky move, then maybe you just want more Flash Cannons while you're trying to stall it out. If you're slower, anti-synergy on Flash Cannon, but some Pokemon are still gonna be faster. I don't know, man! Game's weird. We got a million ideas. I think this is actually kind of neat, though, where you now have like a competent Eviolite Pokemon of any type, and it's going to bring utility that can just win you the game. Like, what sweepers are you afraid of, and what type can you become to just completely negate 80% of offensive combinations with an interesting Terra throw in? I don't know. Figure it out. Or you simplify the game to Unga Bunga Magnezone because you are going to have ludicrous, illegal amounts of damage if you're doubling down a Tera type into Analytic, into Choice Specs, into your crazy amount of special attack, into whatever. Do you go Flash Cannon, Thunderbolt, Terra Blast Electric, Terra Blast Steel? Actually going electric means you drop the Steel, so maybe you don't get into really weird niche magnet pool things, or also other weaknesses. So yeah, going into the electric, better than having the fire and other, like, weaknesses, the fighting with the mono Steel. Also, with the electric typing, Volt Switch gets even more damage. Reminder that if you score a KO with a switch out move like Volt Switch or U-Turn, you have to pick your Pokemon first, so it's kind of like weird disadvantage thing. Now, I think Volt Switch and U-Turn and like those kind of strategies are terrible 99% of the time, so I don't even like care about it. Whatever, you go and int with those moves. Except in like situations like this where, yeah, it's really only just free damage. Or like some kind of beneficial thing to where Magnezone eats the hit and then Volt Switches before Terastalizing, does an insane amount of damage, and then has like good tempo while preserving the end for the Pokemon. But a lot of times when it's just kind of like splashed in, it's just too little damage to matter. So, like I said, 99% time, weirdness, whatever. Body Press. This kind of brings in so many extra options for the Magnezone, it's pretty silly. As Pokemon Sword and Shield got later into its competitive lifespan, Magnezone felt more and more problematic, especially if you're running something like the Blissey. Also, if it goes for like an insane Steel Spike with insane damage while Dynamaxed, now Body Press is just doing more, so it kind of loses a little bit of that freeness. And looking at the Blissey matchup going into Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, it's pretty weird. So even with like the Terastalizing, electric, boosting damage, we are not two-shotting a Blissey. Choice Specs, analytic, but we are two-shotting on the Body Press, and that actually makes me wonder if Blissey really wants to go for minus speed nature, 0 speed IVs, and then make sure that analytic isn't going to apply to it. Does it actually? Yeah, it actually needs the negative nature as well. So you're pretty like having to breed for a Trick Room Blissey. That's not going to be the most fun thing ever, and that's going to be a sassy Pokemon. No, yes, sassy. So yeah, sassy Blissey going to bring that a little bit in line, but still, Blissey doesn't want to be taking that damage from a Choice Specs Pokemon. Now, it does mean that Magnezone doesn't do anything else, and it's going to be like forced to switch or something. But in really dire situations, that could change the battle, or like a Body Press prediction into a switch could be too much, and that's how you end up getting over your opponent's Blissey. Or, yeah, if you're already like committed to the Thunderbolt, still just rocking a lot of damage. Now, this isn't going to be an outspeed everything sweeper. You take a hit, and then you one-shot them. You take a hit, and then you one-shot them. If you're a 3-shot Pokemon, that's good. If you're eating a super effective Earthquake, that's bad. Also depending on like your Tera type, again, see, you don't want to be eating that fighting type move, you don't want to be eating that flamethrower, so this is just kind of like you come in, you get a free nuke, it costs you your Tera type, maybe you get an extra KO, maybe get some other weirdness on top of it, but it's just very, very straightforward Pokemon. However, we could run into a much more problematic Magnezone where you go anti-stall, Iron Defense, Body Press, Substitute, and then you have the Thunderbolt, Tera type for potentially more damage. Is this where you actually go fighting Tera again to mess around with your weaknesses and then just get more damage onto the Body Press? Do you have a weird other typing and then, oh, and how Magnezone just isn't electric or steel anymore, and you have whatever this is doing, a random magnet pull Pokemon that can be any type that sets up Iron Defense's Body Press, but has some kind of powerful, even uninvested Tera Blast. So kind of the same situation with like weird off whatever Magneton. But even then, like, this sets up in a very setup tanky kind of thing. What can they do? Actually, in a semi-ironic way, it still seems pretty good to have the Thunderbolt, because then Toxapex doesn't want to deal with you no matter what it does. Let's say, like, oh man, Toxapex is going for like some kind of Giga Brain thing, becomes a grass-type Pokemon, therefore doesn't have to worry about Thunderbolt anymore. Well, now the Body Press is neutral. And that's actually more threatening damage, but the Thunderbolt, Toxapex still doesn't want to eat that, so that's a thing. This is just kind of like talking about speed EVs for weird speed creep scenarios, maybe, depending on Magnet Pool. I don't think analytic is the thing here, but maybe it is. But like, yeah, if you're trapping a steel type Pokemon and then you're sub Iron Defense Body Pressing it, when you come out of that, you can't die to a Pokemon that has physical, like, you can't die to a Pokemon that uses attack. Anything else that tries to come in, you're just going to really hurt on the Thunderbolt or the Body Press. And if they've had, like, again, there's 5 other Pokemon on your team. If you get rid of 2 of your opponent's threatening sweepers and this thing hits the field, and they still have a Blissey, I think you win. Now, because it looks like Body Press is getting problematic, does that mean Pokemon like Blissey just become a pure poison type on the Terastalizing? That way they can't get Toxic, but then again, Toxic isn't a thing anymore. Or like, Toxic Stalling isn't as big of a deal and as game-defining and game-changing. I don't know, man, but Magnezone's gonna be a very ugly Pokemon to have to deal with in a lot of situations, so even Terastal or not, it's going to be a menace. Looking at the Gengar, alright, Gengar, is it good? Is kind of the question we have to look in here. What if we go for the Tera Blast on Ghost? Maybe it's 90 base power, so better than Shadow Ball. Just kind of checking all of our damage numbers here. Now, the problem is 110 speed. That's not great. Like, it doesn't matter if you just get outsped in one shot, if you go for like all these crazy Tera plays. So, Ghost Terastalization, Choice Scarf, just make sure you're faster than everything, and we see like weird things like even Choice Scarf Greninja being mandatory in some metas. Modest Nature, make sure we get the most damage out of it. We hit a Pokemon like Jolteon, which we now outspeed, and kind of a one-shot, I guess, if you're running Stealth Rocks. I still think Stealth Rocks is mostly terrible. So, is this worth putting onto Gengar? Now, let's say you go Poison Terastalization and then you have Sludge Wave instead because it's just more damage and that's the most you get out of Gengar. Fine, you're taking out a Pokemon that's 65-95. Anything slower than you with the Scarf that's that frail or less is a one-shot. But also your Choice Scarf, so now they can tank it in. I don't think Gengar just has like an offensive thing for using your one Tera play. Are there other Tera types you want to add for coverage? And then like thinking about what standard Gengar wants to do, I just don't think Gengar is ever going to be worth committing the Tera type for, and you also are forced to move slot syndrome yourself. Like I say in the beginning of these videos, like I've said like in all the Tera type discussions, sure, you have the side deck type for the 1% chance you need to just win the game. They have a Swords Dancing Garchomp, and the only way you win is going Tera Blast Ice on the Gengar. But by having the Tera Blast there, if you're not going to Terastalize Gengar 99% of the time, you're move slot syndroming yourself on a Pokemon that needs as much coverage as possible. But really, this last move kind of ends up being a formality on the Gengar, like weird Dark Pulsey interactions, Dazzling Gleam, Energy Ball, Giga Drain. You used to run Hidden Power Ice just as like the straight up Hidden Power, but now you would actually need to Terastalize to access that and then get more damage. Find some other super effective hits. Bolt Beam is really nice. It depends on the meta. Like, does Gengar just need to be a 110 that outspeeds what it needs to outspeed and do good enough damage? I don't know. I think the reality is Gengar has been power crept out of the game for Generation 7 and 8, and you just want to put Tera onto a more cheeky Pokemon that's more reliable on the sweeping and just hard winning, and it's maybe not even just worth using as a beater Pokemon like 130, 110. That's not what it used to be, unfortunately. So, and then losing Levitate, also pretty bad. Like the Cursed Body, you don't have anything to really work with here, so maybe Gengar just not going to be playable. I know it's sad. I'm not trying to offend all you Gengar fans out there, because I know there's a lot of them, but still, like, what can we do here? Compare, like, especially with Tera typings just being able to like phase into other typings, pretty sure there's just a better Gengar everywhere. And if you're trying to run like, oh, speedy Will-O-Wisp Gengar with like Destiny Bond outs and maybe some other like weird setup stuff, again, another Pokemon can just poach all of those things into a different typing on better Terastalization. It is unfortunate. And then Hypno. The only thing I can think about for Hypno is what you do is you go Tera Type Ghost. You go, where is Ghost? I'm just blind. Okay, so you go Tera Type Ghost. You Choice Scarf Curse. Now here's an interaction we haven't talked about that may or may not come up into actual usage, where you become a Ghost type Pokemon, you Curse. You lose half your hit points, you Curse the opponent's Pokemon. So what this does is you outspeed them. Kinda not really, because 67's trash even with a Choice Scarf. You outspeed them, you Curse yourself, you Int, and now it's a 5v6 no Terastalization challenge mode. That's pretty much the only thing Hypno can do. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hope you all have a nice day. Thank you very much for watching.